Hello, everyone. My name is Faz. Happy Faz Day, and welcome to the very first recording of the FazCast. I'm here joined today with Gerald from Core A Gaming. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's evening here in Korea, so you can see I have the mood lights turned on in the back. If you're watching the video, but if this is audio, then you're just gonna have to believe me.
Yes. Well, it's lighting. It's in the morning here in the UK, so that makes it at least interesting. How's the weather been for you? I know I gotta ask this because we're from the UK and we always gotta do this. How's the
Okay.
UK? How's the weather on your side?
Yeah, weather's good here. In Seoul, it's a good time to come to Seoul right now. There's a lot of tourists actually coming
Mm,
around this time because it's kind of still fall-ish. I guess we're
mm.
getting into winter pretty soon. November is tomorrow, so it's gonna start getting cold. But right now, it's this is when a lot of people come to Korea around the September October time. So yeah, it's just really good. Well, how about over there in London? I always hear about the crazy, unpredictable weather in London. Is it predictable this time or not so much?
I'm surprisingly not from London, but
Oh,
it's
okay.
basically the same across the board.
Okay.
The weather in near Manchester, just to give you
Oh,
better
Manchester. Okay.
context, is like the north of England. It's wet. It's very overcast, and I do miss the sun. I was just on holiday a couple of weeks ago, in Zambia, and it was so sunny, and it helps with the mood so much. So yeah, it's overcast and dreary, but that's standard UK weather. We expect this
Yeah,
at
that's what
this
I hear.
much.
Yeah, go
When
ahead.
you came in last time, it was very sunny and very bright. So I think you brought the sun. That's my understanding of the
Oh,
situation.
I don't know if you can give me that much credit, uh, oh, okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. I brought the sun.
Hey, it works. Speaking of sun, so you're Gerald from Corey. So for the viewers who, or sort of the listeners who's never heard of Corey or are familiar with Corey but don't know how you started, how did you first get involved with Core A, and how did you come up with the name?
Yeah, so Core A is actually a video company that I started with some partners to make commercial video content for just general clients. So it wasn't really anything to do with gaming. And to be honest, Core A Gaming came from as kind of an offshoot of the content creation company because to be completely honest, we were not doing good at one point. And when you have a bunch of camera gear and editing equipment and business isn't doing great, you make your own content, right? So it was kind of a desperate attempt to try to make some extra money and do something that content that I like to make. And it was kind of like a necessity thing, but it was like one of those things where it's like you don't want to do nothing. So it wasn't like this is going to be like a huge thing or anything. It was just kind of like, okay, if you're not making content in a business where you're paying rent at an office, you better make your own content. And
Mm,
it's good to keep your editing skills and your filming skills practiced so that
yeah.
whenever the jobs start coming in, then you'll be ready for that. And I guess I had no idea. I was just an FGC guy that was really into I was really inspired by watching Daigo and Justin Wong at EVO 2009 with a very hype finals. And yeah, I was just an FGC person who was playing in the Korea scene as well. And I wanted to make content. And I felt like at the time there weren't a lot of people doing content from the Korea region in terms of like fighting game stuff. Of course, there's the stuff in the Korean language, but because I speak Korean and English, I felt I could kind of translate some of that region into content that would be good for an English-speaking audience. And of course, I had decent equipment to make it look decent as well, and that's kind of how I started. If you look at the oldest Core A gaming content, it's actually just like there's like highlight clips and there's like interviews with the players after some local matches. Like these are players that I know, but a lot of these players, most people won't know about outside of Korea. So I just kind of wanted to showcase the FGC here, and just kind of turned into this channel where I was doing all sorts of content, and eventually at one point I did a video essay about fighting games versus real fighting, like combat sports fighting, and it was kind of a reaction to I think something Jimmy Kimmel said. It was around a time when game streaming was becoming a thing on the internet, but people were like, "What the heck is going on? Like, why are people watching other people play games?" And obviously, for me, that was the answer is obvious. I mean, people watch people build houses, go fishing. People watch people talk shows. People watch cooking. Why wouldn't people want to watch gaming, right? It's just something that hasn't been shown in general media. But in South Korea, it's been a thing for a long time, thanks to StarCraft. So when you turn the channels, there's always been StarCraft matches on television that you can see. So I kind of had like it was a little bit of a some of the things I said maybe weren't completely fair to the combat sports side, but it was kind of like it was a very passionate kind of video where I really made my case for why fighting game stuff is awesome. And that's kind of the video that started the analysis videos. So that was like the first analysis video, but that's before the Core logo was at the beginning. And I remember that video getting shared by a lot of people in the FGC and many of which that I looked up to. So it was like, it was kind of a big deal. I was like, whoa, this is kind of resonating with people. But the channel didn't grow until much later. I just kept on doing it because I thought there was an audience for that kind of content. And eventually what happened was the analysis videos kind of took over everything. I did guides. If you look on the channel, there's like fighting game guides and highlight reels of locals and just a whole mix of content. But eventually it just work started picking up in the main content creation business, and I just kind of focused energy on the analysis videos, and I stopped calling them analysis videos because it just like those are the only videos that I'm making now, so it's kind of weird to put a category. I used to put side note category and all that kind of stuff, but at this point I'm just making the videos, and people basically are expecting some kind of analysis type content, and I'm just going to keep on doing that. And of course there's the Patreon content and the stuff that's the extra content that I announced recently, which is going to be mostly on Patreon and of course the stream. So I don't know if that was a very long-winded way of saying how the channel came about, but yeah, that's about it.
It's very thorough. I'll give you that. It's pretty. It covers all the bases. It kind of does touch upon some of the questions I wanted to ask you about. So
sure.
Obviously, I hadn't realized that you did guides before you did your first analysis videos. So I guess my first question at that point is, what made you come up with the first analysis video? And you did touch upon it with the talk show with Jimmy Kimmel, but I think that was one of the other videos you did, because you cover quite a few areas. I can't remember the very first one you did. I know you talked about frame lag, because the whole Street Fighter 5 stuff. You've talked about heroes and villains in the FGC, 2D versus 3D. And I can't remember off the top of my head which one was the first one. I do apologize. But what made you come up with the very first analysis video at that point?
Oh, so the
style you came up with.
The first one was the Jimmy Kimmel response video. That basically like where I talk about virtual fighting games, or virtual fighting versus real life fighting. Right. So
I remember.
Yeah. So basically, it was kind of
Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, it was a bit of kind of a defense of watching gaming / fighting games. It was an interesting moment where I think it was the Mayweather Pacquiao event was super hyped up around that time, and I was hyped, and I watched that I watched the fight with a bunch of friends. It was at Arcade Stream, I think, the fighting game venue at the time. And with fighting game people and non-fighting game people, we watched it in a group, and we all enjoyed the the game together, or the match. And then with a few other people, we watched Evo. I think it was that same year, and there was a lot of hype at that Evo, and people were screaming and yelling when we were watching it in our office. And one thing I realized was that there was a hype that existed while we were watching the Evo tournament that didn't exist when we were watching the Pacquiao Mayweather fight. And that's fine. That's whatever. I mean, it's you can enjoy something without screaming and yelling and getting really tense in certain moments. But that was kind of a peculiar thing to me, because you have this big thing that's pay-per-view, and actually in Korea it wasn't pay-per-view at the time. They actually played that for free in Korea. But that was the moment I realized, like, oh, okay, there's something with this fighting game stuff, even for people who are not into fighting games, who are watching these matches, people who just might be into gaming and seeing close matches, and you just have these life bars and stuff. And that's later I saw the Jimmy Kimmel thing, where he's just kind of kind of basically like shit talking gaming or watching gaming or whatever. Not gaming in general, but like he had to have like Markiplier on the show to try to understand what this thing about like watching gaming is about. And that's when it clicked in my head. I was basically like, wait a minute, okay, so the people watching gaming has to like defend themselves of why this is like a worthwhile activity. Yet I just saw people losing their shit who aren't even into fighting games by watching Evo, but then the reactions and the hype was different with the boxing match, right? Yeah. And so that's when I was like, okay, there's something that people are not understanding about this thing, and that's what kind of inspired me to make the video. It's something I had to say it. I had to say something, and I wasn't even thinking about like the video essay format or anything. I just made the video. It was a very quick video that I made. I think I made it in like a week, which is crazy fast for that kind of video. And yeah, it was something I had to say. So that's how it came about. Yeah.
So you've made your first video, and it's a relative success. How did you come up with the idea with the next video after that? Because that's always going to be a thing of, you've done the first one, oh, this looks really good. How, what kind of inspires you to make your next topic? Because you do cover quite a wide area of topics that, let's be fair, no one really talks about in the FGC at first glance.
Yeah. So there's kind of one of the things I like to do with these video topics is to just, if you're in the FGC and you meet FGC people, you're going to be talking about fighting games a lot, and you're going to be having conversations that go all over the place, right? I mean, there's a conversation about the game itself, of course, and then there's like the meta game, there's the meta game, and there's stuff that's almost like you're relating just real world concepts to fighting games, and you can get all these kinds of ideas. And so a lot of the videos after the first one came about because I just had conversations with people, and sometimes the conversations got really interesting. There were theories and ideas that people had that I thought would make a good video topic. And basically, kind of my litmus test for what would make a video that would be compelling for people to watch and engaging is if the conversation that I had is engaging to the people I'm talking to, right? So, or for example, like I had this. This isn't quite the next video after the first one, but it was one of the earlier videos. It was about like doping in esports, right? Like the idea of having having like different drugs in your system when you're playing these games, and how it can affect the play and how it affects the entire the ecosystem. And of course, this is a topic that, like, I guess people don't talk about too much, even to this day, when it comes to competitive gaming. But there have been some blowups, of course, regarding this. And I talked to some friends who compete in the FGC that talk about this kind of being an issue. And one of the most interesting things that I heard was, like, it was one of my friends was talking about how he had a different strategy for playing against people who were on different substances, I should say. It was very interesting because he talked about, like, if someone's on some kind of stimulant, then he would say, like, one of his strategies was they have a very itchy trigger finger. The advantage is their reactions and focus is on point. They're very, very fast. And but what you can do with those kind of players is, because they're so focused on, like, getting that whiff punish or whatever, you can bait it out easier with, like, a light attack or in neutral. So he's actually adjusting his playing to whatever substance he sees that his opponent might be on. And that just kind of blew my mind, right? It's just what you're thinking about that too. And so these conversations kind of led to that video, for example, right? And that's definitely not like a topic that people talk about too much. Actually, I can't really remember the last time there was, like, a big conversation about that, but for me, that was fascinating. Just to see that to see that was kind of a thing in competitive gaming. And why not? If, of course, it's in sports, right? And so a lot of my analogies and stuff come from sports as well, traditional sports, because competitive gaming is kind of in between, like, the mind game, the mind game, which is like chess, like the turn-based aspect, but then there's a real-time aspect, like you have in traditional sports like baseball or whatever. There's so, like, it's kind of like this in-between ground. You don't have a lot of time to think about what your next Oki attack's going to be, because they're going to get up, like, in 1 second. So those sports elements do seep into competitive gaming as well. And I think there's a lot of conversations that haven't been talked about, maybe more now than before, but at the time it was kind of, it was around 2015, 2016. So this stuff, I don't want to say it was in its infancy, but definitely was much smaller than competitive gaming is now.
So I haven't really, we've talked about a lot about the content side, but I haven't really talked enough about your experiences in fighting games in general. What I wanted to ask was, what was your first fighting game, and what got you to that understanding of the next level of competitive games? Because we always have our first fighting game, but then we always, as I like to say, is there's always that one game that brought us to the dance.
Just to start, I do want to say that 2009 is when I got into FGC stuff, not into fighting games, but into FGC, which is, like, I learned about, like, people like Tokido and Daigo and Justin Wong in the 2009 era. But when I actually made content was 2015 for fighting games. It was 2015. And then the first time I played a fighting game and that just blew my mind was when it was when Street Fighter 2 came out. It was, I think, in 91 or 92 when I went to the arcade and I saw this game. I was like 8 or 9 years old, and basically I played Guile in World Warrior, the very first Street Fighter 2, the one that just blew up the arcades, right? I played Guile, and other people could not select Guile, right? Because there was no like picking the same character at the time. I think it was Mortal Kombat that introduced the mirror match, where you can choose the same character. That's why it's called mirror match to this day in the FGC, because of Mortal Kombat 1's mirror match, where you'd have to fight your own character before you met Goro or whatever. So I was, and I didn't know at the time that Guile was top tier or a very good character. I just knew that I liked this character. He was green, which is my favorite color, and
Mm.
he had sonic booms, and I was, I was beating a lot of people in the arcades. I'm like 8 or 9 years old, but I'm beating these adults, and
Yeah.
uh, I remember that I made some of these players actually very visibly upset for losing. I made them salty.
Yeah.
And if you're like a 8-year-old kid and you can make a fully grown adult feel angry and upset at what you're doing to them, that's a
Yeah.
very powerful feeling, right? That's like,
Yeah.
oh wow, this guy's mad that I'm like outclassing him in this game, and
Yeah.
that that is an addictive feeling to to win in these games. And of course, at the same time, it was the arcade era where you had another incentive to win. It was to keep playing. So if there's a lot of people on a Street Fighter 2 cabinet, it was so popular that there were people who were just crowded around a cabinet, and it was sometimes hard to get a game in. You'd have to wait your line, and winners stayed on, right? So
Yeah.
if you were rewarded for winning and doing well and playing your best by getting to play more, and you didn't
Yeah.
have to pay play more. The person who lost, if they wanted to play again, they would have to pay more. And I remember at the time it was 50 cents for a credit. It was like a lot of arcade games were a quarter, 25 cents in
Yeah.
the U.S. And Street Fighter 2 was such a hot game, they could charge 2 coins for that, which is 50 cents. And there was the culture where you put the quarter on the cabinet, like on the window of the cabinet, to mark your next the that you have next.
Yeah.
And uh, yeah, when I played Street Fighter 2, that was what got me hooked. And then of course, after Street Fighter 2, there were so many fighting games that came out. Obviously, Mortal Kombat was the same. I loved Mortal Kombat. I remember my mind being blown when I saw the first juggle combo. Like I remember
Yeah.
somebody did with Sub Zero did a jump kick and then froze them in the air, and then like uppercutted them. I was just like, what? You can do that? This is crazy. And um, so I saw these like tricks and stuff to where you can really like learn these secrets to different techniques and get better at the game and have an advantage. And that was just a really cool feeling. And so yeah, I guess that's kind of my origin story for fighting games. Is it goes back to Street Fighter 2 when I was a kid.
You already mentioned before, like 2009 was when you got into the more FGC. So that's Street Fighter 4, if I've got that correct.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like during the 90s, I did go to arcades where there were local people who were like known as like really good players.
Yeah.
I think later on it was, I remember Street Fighter 3, the next generation came out, and we played at a mini golf place, which was called Putt Putt in Texas. I know there's Sunnyvale in California. That's kind of the birth of the FGC as we know it in a lot of ways. But my arcade was at this mini golf place, and there was a scene there of people who, and for me, I didn't know what a scene was at the time, or like I wasn't like in the news groups, I was looking at magazines and stuff at the time. I remember, but there was definitely like the guy that was like the best out of everyone in that arcade. And every time that person came, we'd all try to beat that person, but we'd all get bodied. And
Yeah.
I specifically remember like I jumped in on this guy and he did Ryu's what is it, the Shinryuken? No, that's Ken. Shin Shoryu. So
Yeah.
Ryu, yeah,
That's
the one that takes like half your life, and that image stuck in my head when I jumped in on that guy, because like, whoa, I've never lost so much health for jumping in on someone ever. And so yeah, so that was kind of like, I guess, I don't know, maybe was that when I got into the FGC, or was it when I knew about the greater FGC? I don't know where you draw the line on there.
I would normally class it as when you either find out more about the community of what the fighting game community is. So from my perspective, to maybe help was when I first found out about Evo. I went to university and my friend was super into Street Fighter Third Strike. And that was the first time I ever even heard of the game, played the game. I was very late to the party. So I played Street Fighter 4 before I had played Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. And he was the one that mentioned to me about Evo. And then that's when I got introduced to the upper echelons of fighting game players. So that's when I first found out about the Daigo, Parry, Tokido.
Yeah.
Then you've got people now like Punk and Mena Adi and so on and so forth. So for me, it's like, how do you know? It's like when the first time you see the top of the mountain, because you understand like how much, how pro or how technical the game can get.
Yes.
That's when I found out about it. At least that's where I class it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's probably the way I would describe it for you, is like, when did you find out about the outside, like when did you find out about your first kind of Evo or your local tournament? Or
Yeah, I think I found out that was definitely 2009. I remember the Daigo Justin Wong grand finals in 2009. Was it Ryu versus Boxer, and so I don't know exactly where I found it, that match, but yeah, that was kind of I'm definitely like a proper 09er, I guess. I remember when that was a thing, and then there was like 16er for Street Fighter 5, people who got into Street Fighter 5, and then of course that was a very Street Fighter centric way of identifying FGC people, and now like being an 09er is like an OG, I guess. I don't know, like that kind of stuff is, I just know I've been around for a long time at this point, and it's yeah, a lot of things. It's weird where you kind of delineate that, but like you said, it's, I guess you have to know the upper echelons of the community to really, I guess, like if you don't know who the Pope is, then it's like it's like, how much of a Catholic are you, or how devoted are you, right? So it's kind of like one of those things, maybe.
It's less how devoted you are, but it's more like you understand where you stand. That's the way I
Yeah.
look at it. It's like, I don't know if I'd ever beat Cuddlecore in, Herjack is insane. But it doesn't mean I don't want to go up and try and be like, let's go, I want to know like that technical difference. You can
Yeah,
see the top,
that's
you don't know where the bottom way is.
yeah. I think that's an important thing to know. But there's also a lot of people who just kind of play and play these games with what's in front of them. So there's a lot of people who might not know about the community at large, but they'll play the games online, and they might be in ranked or whatever, and that's the amount of enjoyment that they're good with, and they're cool with that. But then there are people who might go further and start watching people's streams, which is now ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? You can see, almost, it's like, who is the best at this game, and chances are they're streaming, and you can watch them play live.
We were talking about streaming, as like, this is now your quote unquote like the modern day local arcade. That's your local now, isn't it? And we talk about local as in like, local seems more like a more I feel like in real life locals have taken a more of a higher seat to it now, because streams are easy to get to. Locals are slightly harder. You have to put in effort to get to a local now, and that's usually a tournament of some sort. You don't normally just go to a place to take part. How would you sort of equate that in Korea? Is that more the same thing? Or are locals more common than I think they are? Because I'm basing it on where I am in the UK.
Yeah, so I guess what's happened in Korea is like, this has kind of happened all over the world, and even to a large extent in Japan. Like, physical locals have diminished a lot because of a couple of things. Obviously, arcades have been dying for a long time, right? I mean, arcades are just, to find an arcade with the latest version of your favorite fighting games is very difficult in this era. And I think the only place you can really reliably find that is in Japan. I feel you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know exactly what the scene in England is like, but in terms of like finding an arcade scene where you go and there's a bunch of games and there are people trying to get good at those places and sharing tips and repeating their visits and finding each other. I feel like that's it's much more diminished now all over the world. But I think in Korea, what happened was what made it a little bit diminished a bit more is the fact that the internet's pretty good here, and playing online is actually like pretty good now with fighting games, because this generation of fighting games has kind of figured out rollback netcode. Remember that time there was a time when everyone's like, dude, why aren't these games having rollback netcode? And we got to have rollback netcode. And then now everybody has rollback netcode, right? And then like the internet's really good here in South Korea, and Japan is close by, so that's like a fighting game mecca of sorts. So there's a lot of, you could have a good online matchmaking experience in ranked if you live here. And if you just want to get games, you can do it so easily in the comfort of your own home. And so it's a little bit harder, because back in the day there was no such thing as online play, or any online play that was taken seriously. So it's and even if you like, let's say like, when Fightcade was out, that had rollback netcode. When that came out and people were playing on that was great. But then, Fightcade didn't have the newest versions of Street Fighter or the newer games. And so you would have to just rely on whatever the netcode was on those games. And so the best experience to play these games at one point was going to your locals. It was just the best, like, as a matter of fact, I wouldn't even say best. I would say like one of the only experiences that you can have to meet people who are part of the community that maybe are not like your friends, just people that you don't quite know yet. So like, I remember like even in Korea when I was here during the 4 days, like there's an arcade in Sinchon, which I met a few people there just because there was a Street Fighter 4 cabinet, and people were playing there, and people were really getting into it. And like one of these guys just hit me up, like I think like, I don't know, like 14 years later or something. It was crazy. Just like, hey, Gerald, you going to Singapore for the tournament? I'm like, I can't make it this time. He's like, oh, okay, we should try to catch up. I'm like, whoa, this guy I just met. Like that kind of experience is, I think, super valuable. And I think it's a bit it's a bit tougher these days. And I think having some experience in running like a place for locals, like business wise, it's a challenge. And it's obviously COVID didn't help. But it's, I think it's tougher these days now. But then there's other ways of building communities, and the online stuff actually is valuable. And I think there are people that do meet offline at events. Like I said, there was a Singapore major, but it's just not as I guess there aren't as many like meetup opportunities as there was before, and that's kind of that's a little unfortunate, but I guess that's on the positive end. We can now get matches almost any time for some of these games and have a good experience online, right? So
true, you got a point there. I was going to say that the more meetup spots are like to do with tied to other events more often. Like there was a point in time where you wouldn't even think of a Tekken tournament being hosted at a large event like a San Diego Comic-Con, and if we're talking America. But and I don't know what the equivalent in Korea is, but in the UK, we just recently had EGX MCM, and they had a Tekken tournament that's had a very big turnout compared to usual. So I guess where the occasion is, I guess it feels more special because it's at these more bigger places. But then, like you said, you don't technically need to do that at this point in time. It's not everywhere yet, but you don't technically need to do that if it's a first world country type situation.
There's I think there's also, like, I should add, like, there's also a cultural component. I think, for example, like whenever I go to events in like locals, or maybe not just locals, but like like a CPT event in Korea, I noticed that a lot of people who just want to play don't come out in as big numbers as maybe an event in the U.S. from my experience. So
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons is there's kind of an idea that like here in South Korea, it's if you want to go to those events, you have to be good at the game. Like you have to be
Oh,
at
okay.
some
Yeah.
level, or else it's like, what am I? Do I even belong at this place, right? And so there
Yeah.
kind of is this idea where there's players who just like I'm not good enough, right? Whereas like in the U.S. when I go and play, there are people who just like there's like lots of beginners that will just go to these places and just like, hey, I'm just trying to like mess around and see what happens, and then they get into it that way. So
Yeah.
there is kind of a little bit of a difference, and I think a lot of people will stay at home to grind and get good if they ever want, and come out later when they get really good. But when is that? Who thinks that
Yeah.
they're good enough to come out now to a real life event? It's like when's that going to happen? If you were afraid to go at the beginning, then what makes them think that they'll get there when they get to gold or platinum or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
you got a point there. I
So
didn't.
yeah.
That's a good point because I've thought that a lot as well. I've also find that like even from a streaming standpoint, when you're trying to do like locals in that sense, where you're just trying to encourage people to play. Some people don't want to join a tournament, even if it's low stakes or there's no stakes in the tournament. They'll be like, I might get bodied. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be this, that, or the other. And it's very difficult to convince a person to just put the time in and say, listen, it's not about the winning. It's literally just about taking part. And I'm just happy that you're here. And we can, the more experience you get, the more you get to talk about it. And yeah, we want to celebrate the wins, but we also, but there's always that idea of, I think this sometimes comes up too, the participation award, right?
Yeah.
The idea of, you want to celebrate the wins, but you also want to celebrate that everyone that takes part. But it's like, who technically deserves it more? And I'm
Well,
like,
yeah. That's definitely a good distinction, and sometimes I think people will feel that kind of stuff is at odds. When I
yes,
think when I think actually what happens is when the people do come out, they realize that people are way friendlier than they thought, and more open to playing with them, and sometimes helping them. And this is what I've noticed when we were running the local events. There were a lot of new people that came, and the people that do come, they usually have a pretty good time and meet some friends and play some good games, and they realize, oh, wait, this is actually pretty cool. Like I can come back, and those people had to overcome this first step of getting to the local, right? And so
yeah,
I think, and it makes sense because if you think about it, there are a lot of people who don't like to play ranked because of ladder anxiety, right? So
yes,
if people are getting ladder anxiety, like imagine like going to a tournament where you show you're in person, right? So
yeah,
there's a big step, and there are definitely players who have who are actually even really good at the game that have this kind of anxiety, and there are people who are not as good at the game who don't care. They just go and play, and it's not about how good you are, right? It's about how I guess the way you frame it in your mind. So I am actually working on a video right now that kind of touches upon that topic, because there is the idea of getting into this thing where you can lose and your skill level is measured and all that stuff. It's very scary. It's not in a lot of ways it's not for the faint of heart, but
yeah.
it's
That
not
makes
as bad
sense.
as what people think, right? And I think it doesn't help that online you see a lot of people like throwing shade at others for dropping combos, or it's just like, wow, tough crowd online. But then there's also like that's with like like the top players and stuff. Like those people are going to get all this attention, and of course they're being scrutinized. Whereas if you're just going to a local and you're just like trying to get into this thing, I feel that it's not going to be like that, right? There's just it's not all these like thoughts that they're all going to laugh at me, or they're all, I'm going to go there and, I'm going to not know how to do this thing, and people are going to take notice. I think there's a lot of that kind of idea floating around in people's heads, and I think I'm working on this video essay that kind of talks about that. The fact that if you go, what usually happens is, the worst thing that usually happens is maybe you don't play well and no one remembers, right? And no one cares. No, they're not gonna not everyone's gonna you're not gonna hear a DJ record scratch and everyone's head turns to you and do you see that guy drop his combo? It's not. So yeah, but I can see where people can have these thoughts and feel that way, and so there's the next video I'm working on is touching upon that actually quite directly.
Okay, so we've got a sneak peek. I feel like the next step to that is the idea of banter. So you touched upon it with heroes and villains way back when in the FGC, because the idea of basically crapping on your opponent, or if you have good enough people who know how to back and forth properly, that it's entertaining and it becomes a grudge match. The salty sweet, all these little things that has been quite. I want to say it's such a wrinkle to the FGC specifically that I feel like some people don't get it. That it is meant to be just banter and it starts and ends that way, but nobody set the rules to. So because I feel like this is just a more in real life thing. Anyone who's listening to this first time will probably hear me will know is he's talking about this thing again. But I feel it works across the board with the FGC as well. So do you ever come up with the idea of this is banter? Wait, this is not banter anymore. We've gone past the point of banter, or nobody gets it.
Yeah.
Or do you feel it's a bit too, how can I put it? Too sportsmanlike, I guess it's probably the best way to describe it.
Yes. So there's, as fighting games and the FGC gets bigger, obviously there's more eyes on the thing. And there are going to be people that see this culture and not understand a lot of things, right? There's going to be more and more people who have not seen this, and they'll see the fighting games, and the thing that will be on their mind is what is this thing where people are just mashing a bunch of buttons, right? And so there are things that can for people who have been in the fighting game scene for a long time, it's just kind of normal and it's fun, but it might seem like kind of brutal to people who might be looking from the outside. And it can get brutal. It can get it can cross the line. Of course, there's always people who take anything too far, but I think that there is kind of a level of, in a certain sense, the trash talk and that kind of thing is, I think it's celebrated more or less depending on the community and the type of game, and even within the FGC, I would say that there's the subcategories, the different kinds of fighting game scenes within the FGC has kind of different boundaries on that, and generally it seems those kind of things are. You want to keep it in the game. Obviously, you don't want to. You want to talk about the person's skill level in the game, rather than talking about their personal life or whatever. And there's also kind of a joy to playing with your friends or people that you know and just shit talking each other. And the thing is, what I noticed is that when you meet people who are kind of who are obviously been in the FGC for a long time, you're more and more comfortable with that. I remember Jabali came to Korea, and we played each other in a bunch of Street Fighter games, and I think he beat me in most of them. I think I beat him in 5, but he beat me in all the other ones. And we were just trash talking each other the whole time. And Jabali was like, "Hey, Gerald, maybe you should go back to content creation because I don't know if this is for you." And I was like, and so we had this back and forth, and it was kind of this understood thing. And you have this just with people in fighting games. You don't just randomly do it. Obviously, me and Jabela, we knew about each other and everything, but it kind of that kind of relationship builds up pretty quickly. Another one is Javi, who does Texas Showdown. We kind of, I mean, the first time I met him, I beat him in ST, Super Turbo at Evo, which was the side event, and I think at the time I was talking to Chris Creasy, and he walked over, and I think he knew Chris Creasy as well, and basically was like, "Oh, you know the scrub too," referring to me.
Wow.
And I was just like, I started laughing because this is like, this is hilarious. Like if you're in the fighting game community, that's something that you expect. And we kind of had this back and forth. I think we were tied on the record. I think he beat me at Combo Breaker, and I don't know if we met after that, but there's kind of this understood thing that's going on. But then obviously, if somebody like who doesn't know about the scene and how people talk to each other, see something like that from the outside, it's like people might be like, whoa, that's kind of crossing the line. And so there is a line for sure. It's hard to know exactly where that is. This is why the FGC tried to make like a code of conduct thing and tried to figure out where that line is. And of course, some people don't like the fact that there are people trying to draw these lines, and it's like, who gets to make these rules. And so in a community sense, it is a thing that's that I think is always people are kind of trying to figure out and do things. It's a hard job for sure. So and I don't have all the answers. Just for me, it's kind of one of those things you kind of know when you see it. Obviously, like there's like things like if you're gonna trash talk, like don't, like if someone just came to the FGC to try to like play these games and try to learn, and like you just start like saying all this stuff to them, like obviously that's not good, right? But yeah, but then like if people are of a similar skill level and they're like rivals, and like a great example is like Dragon Ball Fighters, DBFC. You had Sonic Fox and Goichi. That was a great rivalry during that time. At the peak of that, it was so hype. Everybody just wanted to watch these two play, and they couldn't wait to watch the next time they met. And it was like USA versus Japan. I mean, those are great. That's the kind of thing that really makes the fighting game community worth getting into and following. I think those kind of stories. So I guess that's kind of where I stand on that.
Okay. Because I know some people just want to be like their first interaction with the FGC is usually the banter stuff. It's like I'm surprised I'm using this as an example, but I guess it works out. Mario Party, where it's like you leave your friends at the like you come in and everyone's under the understanding that things are about to get heated. So when we leave the board, that's it. Like it all stays on the board, and that's it. It stays, like you said, it stays in the game. So it, like in this day and age, especially with content creation and from an entertainment standpoint, it's always more entertaining when you see it, and everybody kind of yearns. I want to say more people yearn for that sort of relationship with certain games and certain friends that they may come up with. And I feel like the FGC is probably one of the more well-suited ones for it because it's so direct. It's usually 1v1. It's so intimate.
Yeah, it's personal and intimate. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's an interesting one to expand upon at some point down the line. I just don't know if we'll have time for it today because there's so much now. Like we're almost at an hour, and I'm kind of like, oh my god, there's still so much that I would like to talk about, but I don't know if you have time.
This is why we started the podcast. Is basically like every week we have like an hour of talking about these kind of things, and so but yeah, right now I'm talking to you about it, but I'll be next week I'll be talking to Kevin about similar topics, and this is. There's so much interesting stuff, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why we are doing the podcast thing. Yeah.
So my other one is that I don't think I've actually asked you this because it's been an hour in and should have been one of my first questions I asked. What is your favorite fighting game? Because it happens to be like obviously there's always your legacy favorites. But what's your legacy favorite and what's your current favorite?
Okay. I like the nuance to that question. A legacy favorite would definitely, I would say, Street Fighter 2. So of those games, obviously Super Turbo is the one that people play in tournaments still often enough to be like a reliable side game at Evos and combo breakers. So Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, I guess that's my legacy jam. And I guess when it comes to the modern games, I would have to say, I don't know if you would count this as a modern game. Street Fighter 4 holds a big place in my heart.
I don't know if I'd class it as a modern game at this point because it's two
Yeah, it's kind of like an
generations
old
down,
game.
but-
Yeah, so I guess we can take that one out. But I guess
I mean,
like
you
if
can
you want to
have
go
more than one. You can have-
if you want to go modern, like now modern, I'm really like Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
I've said this on my stream. Street Fighter 6 is I feel like they've kind of taken Street Fighter 5, like all the things from Street Fighter 5 and all the good things about Street Fighter 5, put it into 6, and then just added layers and layers and layers to the point where people are like, oh, this game has a huge mental stack. And I think that's awesome. And the way they approached accessibility by having the modern mode, I think that was actually a good move, because the way that the modern scheme works is, yeah, it's got. I really think that the Street Fighter 6 is kind of like, I make this analogy. I don't know if people get it because it's kind of like a nerdy analogy for like older millennials, but I feel like Street Fighter 5 was the Windows Vista. And,
wow!
And Street Fighter 6 is like the Windows 7, right? So that's 7 kind of built upon Vista, but it has the input buffer. The universal input buffer was in 5, but it's also in 6. And that kind of made it so links were easier to access, and you wouldn't have to spend so much time on those for certain characters. And but at the same time, they made the normal ranges longer, so like the low forwards feel good again, in my opinion. I know that's right now. Street Fighter 6 is kind of, people are like, oh, okay, it's kind of low forward fest, low medium kick into drive rush fest right now. So
yeah,
I really like Tekken 7. During that time, I mean, I invested a lot of time into it. That Tekken 7 was kind of my first Tekken that I like tried to play well in and enter tournaments. And previously, I was basically one of those choose Eddie and just mash kicks, or Hwarang and mash kicks kind of players. But like with 7, I was like, okay, let me try this game out. And I really enjoyed 7 a lot. I went back and forth between 7 and 5 during that time, and then at one point I just kind of went all in on 7. And that game holds a nice place in my heart, I guess, for lack of a better term. I remember there's all those hype moments and all those, like, all the players, the OG like Tekken players all came out together, and then there was the Pakistan
region
scene coming in, and just in terms of like the building the scene and all these new challengers, and then the story of like Kudan's coming back in, and just overall Tekken 7, even with like the Akuma being in there, like being like ruining things for people and being really controversial, like all of that. It's just, I loved every bit of that, right? And so I guess what happened after, like when Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8, when they came out, I had been kind of on a hiatus for fighting games, or just gaming in general. I was kind of very busy with the Core A video content business, because that stuff really picked up. That also explains my drought in fighting game content as well. But I'm slow, but I'm usually not that slow. But there's kind of a hiatus period. I guess I just now started recently getting back into like these newer games, and I've been enjoying them. I mean, what little I've played of Tekken 8, I've enjoyed, and I've been kind of going more in on Street Fighter 6 recently. But I do want to pick up my Xiao Yu again and bring her up to a high rank and start playing in tournaments again, because like Street Fighter and Tekken are now, like, those two games are games that I want to grind and get good in. So I'm a bit behind on Tekken 8. I'll get there. Just let me get used to the heat system, and we'll be streaming it too, and it'll be good.
I'm still not used to the heat system, but I managed to make it work. That's just
Yeah,
how
no,
it is.
I know
I've been
Tekken
playing
people
it
are like,
since
what
it
is
came
this
out.
2D stuff coming into our game? Like, what is this?
I mean, I love it. I'm fine with it, honestly, and I'm probably one of the few people who wants to see Akuma come back to Tekken.
Oh, wow, you're gonna say that publicly? Okay, brave.
I'll say it in front of everybody. Like
Okay,
I'll need
all
a
right.
mic, give me a stage, and I don't mind getting booed. That Gal meme where he's just like he won the fight and his hands out in the street in the
Yeah,
TV series.
yeah.
That's me.
All right.
I'll take it.
You're
Don't
ready.
worry.
You're ready. Okay. All right. Well,
Like I won't ever made him because I'm terrible with Street Fighter, but
Yeah.
I will defend his honor for being in the game. He's still
No,
canon in the game as well. Like
I love.
they didn't shy away.
Yeah, he is canon. He's like not a DLC character actually in
Yeah,
Tekken
yeah.
7. He was part of Fated Retribution as a default character, right? So
Yeah, he base roster, but they still reference him in Tekken 8, in one of the lore drops. So it's like he's still there. He still counts. They're not shying away from using Akuma's name.
Yeah.
He's still there. So hope is there for me, at least personally.
Well, yeah. I mean, I loved playing Akuma and Xiao Yu, both of them in Tekken 7. So whether they have them or not, I have a character to go to, and I just wish my Mishima play was not complete trash, but like I wish I could be good at Jin. Like I have a secret desire to be good at Jin, but I'm just like, I don't know. Every time I bring him out on stream, that's like, there's like a Jin main that frequents our stream, and he's just face palming the whole time. I just know. So
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, you just be like me, where you just don't main any Mishimas and beat everyone with law instead, so it's fine.
Okay,
Like-
yeah, that's an option.
Or Paul, like I hate fighting against
Oh,
Pauls at the moment.
yeah.
That's my bane of my existence right
Oh well, if you don't like Paul, then that's gonna be hard to play Tekken because you're gonna see a lot of
now.
them.
Yeah, it's just like I'll fight him. I'll take on the mountain, but don't expect me to win.
Yeah.
Like it might take me a while.
Right.
But there's like so many things I've wanted to discuss, because there was one thing I wanted to like going about, because you said you tried Tekken, and there's always this case of muscle memory, and I kind of equate this with Tekken and Virtua Fire. So just to answer the same question, my favorite legacy title is Tekken 3. And
Yeah.
my favorite current is Tekken 8. So I'm a
Okay.
huge Tekken guy.
Yeah.
I'm still don't know how to do shoryukens properly, so sorry.
Oh, you don't need to in Tekken, so you're
I
fine.
mean, yeah, but it's that's how bad I am at Street Fighter. Anyway, going back to point. So this idea of muscle memory kind of comes up, and so for example, if you've played Tekken, how do you get used to Virtua Fighter, and then how do you from Virtua Fighter to Street Fighter, and then you've got like all of this knowledge checks that you've got to try and shoot the hoops for, and be like, okay, how do you remember how to do a level 1? It's like Hadouken twice, I guess. Maybe I'm not sure.
Sure, yeah.
So when you're doing FGC content, how do you sort of because you did the recent video with that was about an hour long discussing all the different archetypes of fighting games, which I
Yeah.
think we needed it. I think somebody needs to go in there and figure this out.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
So my point is, how do you? What's your? I want to say what's your stance on it, but I would say it's more a case of accessibility, of how do you go from one fighting game to another? Because you want to be a fighting game enthusiast across the board.
Yeah.
Because especially as most esports players wouldn't specialize in just one. They wouldn't be as good on other fighting games. They'll have their favorites. They'll have their main. But to be good at other ones, you have to learn a new muscle memory, a new set of skills, a new way of moving your fingers. Do you have an approach to that, or do you just be like, eh?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, I just kind of had to. I mean, it feels like starting from scratch in a lot of ways when you make a big jump from like 2Ds to 3Ds, right? It's a big jump because yes, there are things that carry over, like the idea of whiff punishing. I mean, that's very much like a fighting game thing all across the board. There's the blocking system where you have like high-low blocking, but there's fundamental things that take a long time to get used to in your muscle memory, and sometimes it's counterintuitive because it's actually the opposite. So one of the things that I pointed out in the Every Fighting Game Type Explained video was how in Tekken, stand blocking is kind of your safe stance, right? Or the safe position is to stand block rather than crouch blocking. And so that seems like a very simple thing. It's like, okay, well then just, stand block, and then if you smell a low coming, maybe you can either you could take the low, or you can try to duck and block it and do a punish. And it's easy to say, but then when you're actually playing, that muscle memory is like the opposite. It's like having a bicycle where you rig it up so where if you turn left, it actually makes the wheel go right, and the other way around. Like, you can get used to that. I think there's a YouTuber named Smarter Every Day. I think he actually did that. He made a bicycle that did the opposite, where you turn your handles towards the right, and the front wheel goes to the left. And he actually learned how to ride that bike. He was actually got okay at it later, but imagine you've been riding a bike for so long and having to do that. There's going to be at one moment where you lapse and you make the wrong adjustment and you crash your bike, right? And that fortunately in fighting games you can you can't crash and hurt yourself with anything, but your character will get hurt because maybe you ducked when you shouldn't have ducked there, and now you're eating a mid launcher that takes all your health. So it's kind of those subtleties, those kind of little things that make it that you have to get used to, and so you have to kind of focus on that. But I think a lot of it is there's just a lot to learn. I remember when Tekken 7 came out, a lot of people were learning it from a 2D background, and it's just this is me coming from a 2D background. You come from a 3D background, so when you play 2D games, you probably have some things to say about how it feels and what it seems like. But I can tell you from coming from a 2D background and then going into Tekken 7, it felt like everybody was kind of slow and clunky, and so that's kind of that's. And it doesn't feel like that for me now, because I'm cruising now. I'm doing Xiao Yu, I'm rolling around California rolls. I'm pretty mobile, and I feel great now. But when I was learning it, it just felt like things were it's why can't I just move in and out this whole left, right, left, and then do a shimmy or something? Or why can't I jump? Why am I there's no, I want to jump over everything, but I can't. My character only goes this high. Wait a minute, jumping is not really, you don't really jump as much. Or if, you barely jump, right? So it's those kind of things. And it is very difficult because they are very different games. But then if you go from Street Fighter to KOF or the other way around, well, I mean, that's it's like going from guitar to bass or something, or playing. It's like instruments. You have instruments that are kind of related to each other in a lot of ways, but then guitar to bass might be similar, but then if you go from guitar to violin, okay, now we're starting to get a bit more different. You go from guitar to the drums. Now you're okay, now what is this instrument? It's a completely different concept, but at the same time you're still keeping rhythm, and you're doing a lot of musical things that are similar to all musical instruments. So I guess for me, it's you try to take the similarities and apply that kind of. It's I think a good way of doing it is using the game that you're used to as a base to kind of explain things, and then later forgetting about it, phasing that stuff out. I think a big thing that helped, for example, one thing that helped a lot for me learning Tekken was in Street Fighter, if you block a fireball, it's you get chip damage. It's very little damage, but generally you want to neutral jump over it, but you get a little bit of chip damage, and it's it's there so that you can't just keep on getting chip damage. You have to get chipped because you're a penalty for blocking a fireball. I know it's not like that in Street Fighter 6 unless you're in burnout mode, but generally most Street Fighters have been like that. But in Tekken, somebody said just think of down fours that your opponents throw out. Just if you don't block those, don't worry. When you get hit, it's like chip damage in Street Fighter with fireballs. You get a little bit of damage, not a big deal. It's not worth trying to duck to block it every time. Sometimes you get hit by those little down fours, and no big deal. And that helped me a lot. I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, I can relate to that. Like, I know this is now a concept where you don't want to get hit by too much, and it's kind of more of like a conditioning thing. Like, people are doing those down fours to show that they're kind of checking you. They're like, I see your legs are vulnerable, right? And but then the damage thing is not something that you fret about. And those kind of little analogies helped a lot. So I guess the way to look at it is like, if you're learning different instruments, like if you're going from guitar to drums, which are way different, you can still you still have concepts like rhythm on the drums that come from playing guitar. Like, I mean, obviously on guitar, you're all playing in the same time signature if you're in a band, right? So where those accents come, and the way that the strength of the notes, the velocity of the notes, if that those can translate, and using as much of that stuff to think about the games, I think at least it has been a big help for me.
All right. So we've been here for about an hour and 10 minutes, so I'm going to probably call it there because, again, there's still just so much to talk about, and I would love to talk more about it, honestly. I haven't even got through the mysterious username that is Mint Cheerios.
Oh, Mint Cheerios? Okay, I can explain that one real quick. So just Mint Cheerios is basically, during the 90s, everyone's, like, it was hard to get like an original name without putting a bunch of numbers. Because like you can't, if someone's name or something is parked, that was it. You had to you couldn't use that. Whereas nowadays you can have a weird name, but then like your display name can be whatever you want, right? So that kind of didn't exist back then. So I was so mad that everything was taken. I had like Gerald Lee, Gerald 816, my birthday, Gerald, all this stuff. And everything was taken, and so I was just like, you know what, screw this. I'm gonna have a name that no one will take. Like, this just does not exist. And I made that name, and it's usually not taken. But actually, now that name is out, I think people have been using that name, which is kind of, I guess, I can't do anything about that, right? having Mint Cheerios out there on my streams and stuff, so whatever, I can't do anything anymore about that. But that's where it comes from, just me being frustrated and making a name that did not have numbers in it.
Fair. I thought it was just because Mint Cheerios might have existed in Korea.
Oh, no.
If only.
Yeah. There's a story about like some cereal stuff, maybe for another time, in Korea.
Maybe that should be like a whole FGC analysis video. Like,
yeah, it was a green
cereal say about
Google Google green onion checks. Okay.
Green
onion checks Korea, and then you can see the story behind that. That will be a long time to explain that to you. So I'll just let you Google that.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much for joining me today in this FazCast. Where can people find you? I'm pretty sure people know more or who you are, but just in case, for the people who are uninitiated, where can people find you?
YouTube, Twitter, which is now X, Patreon, and Twitch. Just type in core-a gaming, and you'll be able to find it all on Google or whatever. The name is either COREA gaming, or there's a dash between CORE and A. So yeah,
it was lovely having you, man, and hopefully we get to do this again sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Sorry about the time confusion. I'm glad you're able to do it now.
It's completely fine. Hopefully the next one won't be in like 2 years apart.
Yeah. Well, just let me know.
And for everybody else who's watching, my name is Faz. Thank you very much for watching. You can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Discord, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I don't know what other socials are going to be created by the point when this video comes out. But thank you everybody for joining in. Thank you, Gerald, for joining me. And I hope you guys have a very wonderful and happy Faz Day. See you in the next one, guys. Bye.